Hello and welcome. We are going to be painting a spooky pumpkin here together. But a warm welcome. I'm so glad that you're here today. We'll do a quick review of our supplies before we get started, and then we'll jump right into the painting. So the first thing that you'll need is a cup of water, at least halfway full, to rinse your brushes. You'll need an array of brushes, whether you have received a kit from me or you have your own supplies. Just an array of brushes, small to medium sizes, will work just fine. This will be the biggest brush that we'll use today, but if you have another brush you'd like to use, feel free. You have an array of paints, whether they're acrylics or watercolors. I typically use a lot of acrylic paints for our classes. In addition to your paints and your brushes, you'll need something to paint on. We have an 11 by 14 canvas panel. If you would like to choose your orientation today, my orientation will be landscape, which is the horizontal format. So if you wanted to do yours vertical today, you could, but for today, mine will be our horizontal landscape orientation. In addition, you'll need a paper plate to mix colors. And then the final item is you'll need a paper towel or a napkin for any messes. So take a moment, grab those supplies, feel free to pause the video, and join us back when you're ready to get started with today's project. All right, so one of the first things that we're going to do is we're going to start in the background and we're going to work our way to the foreground. So the first thing we're going to start with is our moody sky, transitioning down with 3 colors, and then we'll be building upon our layers from there. So the first thing we'll do is the sky itself will be at the top like a dark purple and blue colors, and then we'll transition that down for the top third of the picture, and then we'll do some blues in the middle, some like spooky kind of blue eerie clouds in the middle area. And then we'll finish it with some like spooky orange at the bottom, okay? So what you can do is you can grab the blue. You can open up that blue paint and put a small dollop of blue. Now if your paints are a little bit different than mine with regards to hue color, don't worry too much. So you're gonna put a little bit of blue on your plate. You're gonna grab your red. And I like to leave space in between the colors, so I can kind of mix in between sometimes. That's quite helpful. So blue, red, and then a little bit of black. For the black container, they may come in a pocket like this. What you're going to do is you're going to hold the container firmly if you have this container, and you're going to use your thumbnail under the left side, and you're going to slowly peel the left tab up and open. The right tab on these containers does nothing. But if you do this type of container, the left tab will peel the top up and open. So you're going to open up the black, and you're going to put a small dollop of black. We're going to need much of the black for the pumpkin and for the tree. So you may not use a lot of black in the background. Just be sparing of your black if you only have a certain amount. And then I'm going to grab one of my larger brushes. So this is only like a 1/2 inch brush. If you happen to have a bigger one, feel free to use it, but this works absolutely fine. You always get your brush a little bit wet before we get started. And in between the blue and the red, I'm gonna mix a little blue and a little red together, right in between. So I'm kind of pulling from each, and I'm making a dark purple color. Now with art, you always want to mix colors that you like. It's one of the most important things. So find a dark purple that you like. If it's a little too blue, pull in a little bit more red. And there's always a little patience that goes into this with mixing the right amount of color, making sure it's well blended. And I'm going to make enough of it so I don't run out. And I'm just I'm keeping all the paint together. I'm trying not to spread it out. So you can see it's all in one spot right here in the middle, right there. And then you're gonna have some fun. You can do kind of some spooky lines. You can kind of push down to make some like eerie like clouds. We're gonna be filling this whole top third. We're gonna get a little softer on the bottom third here. But you can see I'm just being really playful with these lines. We're gonna do one more technique after this. So I'm kind of pushing on my brush to give it some like wider sections. But the neat thing you can do is while your acrylic paint is still wet, you can take your brush, dip it in your water cup. I don't want it to be dripping. So if you see it drip, that means you have too much water on it. Kind of wipe the edge off. And now it's not dripping anymore. But while this is wet, you can move the paint around. This is like one of the best parts. Move the paint around. Nice, long, smooth brush strokes. And you can kind of get into all those white nooks and crannies. So I might go get a little bit more paint. Maybe I'll get a little bit more water on my brush. And just start to fill in this sky. Now, if you wanted to make this a little bit more gray or black tone, you could totally bring in a little bit of black. Like if I put a little bit of black on my brush, you can kind of just do some like black-like clouds kind of on top of this in some areas, just to make it a little bit more moody and spooky. You can definitely put in some blacker clouds here, just in certain areas. I kind of like to do long and lean clouds, like long and skinny. But I'm coming down about a third, but I'm going to get softer in color as I come down to my third. So what does that mean? So if my third is like right about here, I'm going to get softer with my purple, and I'll show you what that transition looks like. Water's my friend in this case. So I'm doing long, smooth brush strokes with some water on my brush. See how that's softer of a purple? We need that for the transition with the blue. So make sure you have a nice, solid 2 inches of this soft purple for us to merge it with our blue to help with the transition with the sky. So be playful here. You can have this purple area be as dark or as light as you wish. Again, you can grab a little tiny bit of black on your brush and make it a little moody if you want. We are going to be putting a black tree on top of this, so I don't want your sky to be all black or too dark because we want the tree to be able to stand out. But you can see how it just kind of breaks it up a little bit. We also can bring some blue into this purple space after, so you can keep that in mind too. It's always fun kind of bringing some of the blue up as a nice cooling effect. So you can decide how much farther you want to come down with your purple. For me, I'm not going to come down too much farther. I'm just doing some small, soft, smooth brush strokes, and I'll transition in with my blue. You may not want this much purple. It's totally fine. I am going to put a little bit of white with my blue for the blue area. So for me, I'm happy with my purple for right now. I can always come back and modify, but I am going to take my white out. And I'm going to lighten my blue a little bit. And the reason being is I don't need it to be a dark blue. A lighter blue is absolutely fine. Doesn't matter. The lighter blue is also good because it's going to give us a lighter contrast for the pumpkin that's going to be black on top, as well as the black tree. So the lighter blue in the sky is actually pretty important. We'll do that together. I'm just cleaning off my brush. All right. And you don't want your brush to be super wet. You want it to be a little bit wet, so you can kind of just take your paper towel and kind of wipe it off a little bit. That's fine. And if you have a little purple on your brush, it doesn't matter. So I'm going to take a little bit of blue and a little bit of white. You can see how I left a gap again in between these. I do that intentionally so I can kind of pull from one color to another. So you can see that's like a nice light blue. Excellent. So then I'm just going to slowly start kind of bringing in, you could do kind of cloud-like structures here. You can kind of give yourself some bounds of like where you're putting it in, but I'm doing like a blue strip in the middle, remember? So I'm just going to take my time here. And anytime during this class you need to pause the video to take more time in certain areas, feel free to do that. Putting a little water on my brush. You can see I'm just doing some kind of fun like texture. And I can be playful while the blue is wet. I'm going to bring the blue up into the purple. You can do long, smooth brush strokes. See that? See how it's slowly, the blue is getting a little murky up into the purple. You can always take a little bit of blue on your brush too with a little bit of water and like even bring the blue up higher. It's like on the underside of this dark area, maybe there's just a little bit of blue reflection. See that? It just kind of helps the colors in the eye blend it together on your picture. But again, I want you to fill in the sky entirely, how it works best for you. And I like to do, you can see I have some dark areas and some light areas. Can do some long, smooth brush strokes. Acrylic dries really quickly, so it's okay to like leave an area and come back to it and put another layer of paint on top, especially if you have some funky brush strokes. With this painting, you can definitely have some funky brush strokes, which is fine. You can see I'm bringing my blue and my water up onto my purple. See what's helping with that transition. And if you want to get a little bit more eerie, you can always tuck in some like darker kind of clouds as you go. Like if you wanted to make this not so cheery, you can add in like I'm adding in like a black or gray cloud right here just to show you what it's like to make it look a little more eerie. I'm not going to add too many of these because I want the background to be lighter because we're putting a lot of dark objects on top. But this is if you wanted to just make it a little more moody. For consideration. And you can see this is just a little water and a little bit of black, but you can see it kind of just helps set the tone a little bit for this type of scene. So with the blue, if you wanted to like soften some of the blue area with like a little bit of like white cloud-like shapes, you can kind of just do like a little bit of a wiggle for like a wave. If you wanted to do like some dabbing for some like specific clouds, you could do some dabbing with the tip of this brush. See that for some more like specific cloud-like shapes. So you can do some dabbing, kind of give it a little bit of a cumulus. The tops of the bottom of the clouds are going to be nice and straight. See that? But the tops can be a little fluffy like. So you can play with that. It's just a little bit of white paint on the brush. And this is just down here at the bottom. But this is your sky, so you can play with it. We're not going to spend a ton of time down here because there's lots of layers, but I'm just giving you some options on how to bring your sky to life. And the dabbing gives just a little bit of extra texture versus it being just kind of flat and boring. So for consideration, sometimes I like to take a little bit of extra white on the tops of these clouds. Just on the tops, makes it just stand out, kind of shape where the clouds are rounded. So if you wanted to add just a little bit of extra white, on the tops of these clouds, you certainly can. I'm just being a little playful here. I'm not going to do too much. We are going to have a lot of dark contrasting areas on top of this. So sometimes a little bit of extra contrast and brightness can really make your picture stand out a little bit more. So you can consider some of this. If you don't like this, you don't have to do it. I'm here just to give you different tips and tricks along the way. All right. So I'm going to add the end of this blue. It's just going to be nice and soft. I'm just going to kind of do a couple of smooth brush strokes. It doesn't matter really how you end this because we're going to put in some orange directly underneath this. So I have like a nice straight line. You don't need to have a straight line. With art, it's really just about being in the moment and just kind of doing whatever you want. And I like to talk about that in these classes just because it kind of lightens your perspective on like what your art should be. Your art is never going to have its own, it's always going to have its own plan. You're never going to have to you don't have to always follow all the specific rules and all the steps. I'm here to guide you and kind of keep you on track, but your painting's going to evolve. So any way that you want it to evolve, feel free to just be in the moment and just let it happen how it wants to happen. That's one of the best parts of these classes. So I always say in the beginning of my classes that I encourage you to be yourself. And if you have your own ideas that you want to incorporate, feel free to do that. I'm here to empower you as an artist today. All right. So if you need more time on your sky, feel free to pause the video and I'll be jumping into the orange next. And to make orange, it is red and yellow. It's really 75-80% red and a tiny touch of yellow. Let me take that back. It's like 85% red and 15% yellow, rather, or more yellow than red. So I just took a little bit of yellow here and I'm going to bring a little bit of red on the side. And you're going to see how quickly a little red will go a really long way. But I'm going to have you mix an orange. I'm using the same big brush. We're going to use this orange for the rest of the space. But we're going to play with different tones of orange here, which will be really fun. So we're going to do some kind of fun cloud-like shapes here. So I'm going to use this big brush, and I want you to hold your brush a little further back so your hand's a little more loose. And I want you just to do, I don't want to say like a mountain ridge, but play with adding in kind of a fun cloud-like layer here. And this is just the kind of the top outline per se. But just be playful. You cannot mess this part up. These are just fun background colors, I promise. But you can be a little eerie, you know, with your design here. It does not matter. We're going to be painting all of this in, by the way. So no big deal. While this is wet, if you want to get a little crazy, put a little bit of yellow on your brush and just put a little bit of yellow here or there, just to see what happens. And we're going to use water to blend this all together. So while this is still wet, I'm going to have you put some water on your brush and just start painting and filling this in. Orange is the base coat. The reason we put a little bit of yellow, because it's really fun to see the yellow as like a highlighted accent. Kind of makes it look like it's going to be glowing behind the pumpkin, because we'll put the pumpkin on top of this space. But you can see how there's some fun yellow blends coming out. I'm using orange paint to fill this space in, but the water just loosens it a little bit. So you can play with how like solid and straight you want this design to be. See how the yellow is really fun? It kind of like brings out some highlighted areas. But orange is the primary, so you can play with putting a little yellow on your brush, maybe a little orange. You do not need to clean your brush in between. Imagine that. I want you to fill in the rest of the bottom with yellows and oranges. And you can see how bright and beautiful this is. If you need a little water to help with your brush strokes, you could do that. But I don't want there to be any white down here. I want you to fill in all those white nooks and crannies. And I'm going to move pretty quickly through this so we can start working on some of our other areas. But you can see what the yellows does, right? It brings out some nice highlighted spaces. This is exactly what we want for our pumpkin. Our pumpkin's going to go on top of this, and the eyes are going to be glowing using some of this contrasting background. It's going to be quite fun. So I like to put a little pressure as I paint to make sure I fill in all those white areas on my canvas. I'm going to make a little bit more orange. I want to make sure I have good coverage. If there's any overlapping blue areas, the orange will dry pretty quickly. You can easily go and do a second coat up top, like that I'm doing right now, for the orange. So it's okay to like take a couple minutes here to be playful with letting it dry, adding a little bit more yellow, adding a little bit more orange. I want you to be happy with the coverage. It's a really important thing. Enjoying the process. Don't forget to smile. Don't forget to breathe. Enjoy yourself along the way here. It's okay to give your picture a minute to dry. When we paint the pumpkin in, we will add a little bit of extra glow within the eyes and the mouth. So this is really just a background that we'll be able to appreciate per se. But anytime you wanted to downsize to a smaller brush, you could totally do that. I don't think you need to yet, but if you wanted to, you could. I may take a little bit more yellow, just add in a little bit of yellow here and there. Excuse me. And when you're using this big brush, you can hold it on its side for a more narrow brush stroke. You can see if I have it in my hand, that's the wide side. But if I spin the brush in my hand, it's a more narrow brush stroke. You can play with that narrow brush stroke to kind of give it some extra highlights. Once the acrylic paint is dry, it will stick, which is really nice. I personally like having a little bit of yellow in here, but that's your choice. And I can always add more. So I'm not going to be too particular about this right now. Can always add more colors, especially if it's drying. Okay. So take another minute or two if you need to for this orange space. Feel free to pause the video. We will be transitioning to the moon in the sky as our next step. So if you need a couple more minutes, hit the video pause button, maybe keep an eye on the time, give yourself 2 or 3 more minutes, and then hit the play button again when you're ready to do the moon. All right. So we are going to use a smaller brush for the moon. You can use a smaller, like medium flat tip brush. It may look like this. You could use a smaller round tip brush. Anything works. But we're going to use white paint, and we're going to put a large moon in this top corner. Now you can decide the size or scale of your moon, how big or small, and you get to decide the placement. For me, I'm doing mine here. I'm going to go pretty big. I'm going to go the size of like an orange. And I'm going to fill it all in white, and then I'm going to add some spooky colors to it. Oranges and yellows. But I want a nice white coverage moon first. Going nice and slow around the edges. I'll play with my shape, right? Might look a little lopsided. It's all right. It's the evolution of the shape. Take your time. I'm just doing a nice basic white coat inside. Just slowly painting my moon in. In this stage, we're just determining the size and the overall shape. Nice clean edges. And then whenever you're ready, you can start to bring in like a little bit of yellow. I'm gonna keep a little bit of a white ring just so it really stands out, but you can play with your yellows, you can play with your oranges. And where you want to bring extra colors into your moon. You can make it as soft and subtle and bright as you want, or you can keep it, you know, very bright and white. So I'm going to do a little bit of orange, kind of in this top right corner. My paint's a little sticky, which is kind of fun. It's kind of helping it blend. You can give it a little bit of a swirl if you want. Anything goes. You can always bring in more white if you need to. I might bring in, yeah. But one of the things I like to teach in these classes is a little bit of mindfulness. I want you to be happy with what you're doing. To kind of get layers like I did, I just did like a little bit of swirling with like a light orange, if you like that. I call that a happy little accident. But I like it has a little bit of yellow on the left, so I might put in just like a little bit of some brighter yellows just to see what happens. You can play with the sticky factor if your paint is still wet. You can play with creating texture on your moon because of that. Those are all choices you can make. You can always add in more white. So it's good to kind of like let your moon dry. Try not to let your colors blend too much. It's kind of fun watching the sticky factor happen because it's the paints are sticking and holding, but they're blending a little too. So I'm kind of being open to that situation. And you can see I left like significant white ring. I can kind of take away some of that if I wanted just to come closer to the outside moon, like of that edge. I can get rid of some of that if I want to, because I can always add white paint back in, right? So I can take away some of that. And again, you can always put a little bit of like white paint back on your brush to kind of, for maybe down here, this corner is going to be a little bit lighter. You can play with that. So anything goes. I'm being playful with the colors just to give you some examples. But you can just keep it simple. You might be happy with kind of what's happening with your own moon. I will put some bats on top. I may add a little bit more white to it. We'll see how it goes here. Just take your time, have fun experimenting. I think that's one of the most important things. You might need it to dry, especially if your colors are getting a little mucky. My white is turning into orange, so I might take my own advice and just pause. I did brighten that corner up a little bit, which is perfect. So at this step in today's class, we're doing great on time. If you need to pause and take more time for any of the background areas, I encourage you to do so. I want you to be happy with your sky. I want you to be happy with the blues, the clouds, and the orange down here. If you wanted to add in like a smaller purple cloud down here, kind of creeping in on the right side, you could. The inspiration has that, which is kind of fun. So maybe I'll do a little bit of a dark purple cloud just to show you. If you wanted, we're going to keep it low, and it's kind of, this is kind of angled a little bit. It's just kind of layering in. And I'm being really fun with my brush strokes because I'm going to use purple and water to fill this in. I'm not going to go all the way over. I kind of just went tailored down, and I just ended with a nice kind of straight line down here. So I'm just adding in a little bit of a purple cloud in this space. We're going to be putting in some stars for our sky next, as well as some bats flying in our moon. So I want you to be happy with the sky. I want you to be happy with your moon. Take some time to finish those up. Everyone works at different speeds, so the nice thing about a recording is you can pause it and take more time if you need to. There. So I have like kind of a fun murky cloud down here. I might take a little bit of white and just add like a little bit of highlighted areas just to break up the dark purple a little bit. It's okay if it's not, you know, totally defined down here. Bring this a little closer so you can see it. I was just having fun with just a little bit of kind of outlining, like where would the shapes be within this cloud? I'm not going to do too much, but you can see it just adds a little bit of an extra flair. Okay. So I am going to do some galactic stars next, and then I'll do some bats on the moon. So if you need to do any more work on your purple sky, on your moon, your blue, your purple down here, or your orange, pause the video, take a few minutes to do that. And then when you join me, or when you're ready, we can do some galactic stars in the sky. Okay. So if you're interested in doing galactic stars, I kind of have a number 3 brush, which is just a kind of a small round tip brush. I'm taking a little bit of water and I'm mixing it on my plate to make a milk-like consistency. I call this a water wash. We're going to use this to make galactic stars in our sky. If this is thick, you're going to get thick stars. If it's too watery, they'll just be smaller. So you can see what mine will look like in just a minute. There's a couple ways of doing stars. I'm going to use my index finger. This is a little bit of a messy way, but I'm going to hold my brush about 2 inches from my canvas, and I'm going to splat and do galactic stars in my sky. These are going to be tiny. There's an additional star technique that we'll do after. You can do them anywhere you want. Doesn't matter. I'm primarily doing them just in the top. So I have like tiny little galactic stars in my sky. Some of you may have thicker stars. I could thicken my water wash with a little bit more paint, and that will give me thicker stars. So I'll just show you what that looks like just for experimentation purposes. Yeah, so if the more paint you have in there, the thicker your stars will be. You might get a couple Milky Ways if you have these like strands happening. So you can kind of wipe off your finger. I was using this to flick. There's another technique I can show you for stars. You can use the round end of this brush, dipping it in your white paint, and you could do stars and constellations. The softer you touch the end of this brush to your canvas, the tinier the star will be. The stronger you push down, you can see they're much more clear rounded stars. So I like doing clusters of 1 and 2. And you can see it's nice overall texture, right? It is some splatter stars, and it is some really deliberate stars as well. If you wanted to add a shooting star, you could add a shooting star. If you wanted to paint a witch in the sky, you could paint a witch in the sky, anything goes. I am going to paint a couple bats on top of my moon. If you wanted to do like a witch kind of over the moon, that could be a really cool idea. Totally up to you. You could always Google a silhouette of a witch flying on a broomstick if you wanted to. But this is where, again, use your imagination. We're here to have fun. Okay? So get some stars in the sky, and you can see how it really elevates the picture. It really makes it nighttime. Quite fun. So I'll give everyone a minute to play with the stars, and then we'll transition to doing the black bats in the sky. You're going to want a tiny brush for the bats. So as you're painting away, always keep your brushes clean. So you can either leave them in your water cup or you can wash them, kind of wipe off the bristles and lay them next to your picture. Try not to have paint on your brushes just hanging out next door, like on your paper towel, if you can help it. So we're going to do some fun bats overlapping the moon. We actually may wait for the bats because I don't want it to interfere with our tree that we're going to be adding in. So we'll actually do the bats at the very end, just so we can kind of put them around our tree and around our branches. So that might be a little bit better planning. So what we'll do is we'll do our pumpkin next. So I want you to be happy with your sky, your orange area, your purple, your moon. I want you to be happy with all this because we're going to be putting the big pumpkin in the middle. I grabbed like a medium-sized brush for the pumpkin. And we're going to be using black paint for the pumpkin. So the black paint that we'll be using for the remaining of the class is for the pumpkin and for the tree and for the bats. That's only really where we'll be using the black. You should have plenty, but just use it sparingly. Awareness. So this is the fun part. You get to do the outline for the eyes and the mouth first. So you can think about what you want your jack-o'-lantern design to be, but I may do the outline for the pumpkin and then do that outline for the eyes and things. So the pumpkin for me is pretty big. It's like the size of my hand. So I'm going to do the outline of the pumpkin first, and I'm centering it kind of in the middle of the picture. Has like a little divot in the top. We're not filling it in yet, just do an outline only. Does not have to be perfect because we're filling it in. So just play with the outline. Maybe it's a little wider on the sides. Right? You can make it as smushed, as tall, as lean as you wish. You might want to put another pumpkin in. We're going to be putting the tree on the left. So if you wanted to put a smaller pumpkin over here on the right, you totally could. So this is the other fun part. We're doing large eyes. Maybe I'll do a little bit of a rounded piece. The bigger the eyes, the better, because I want you to hold space for this guy's our pumpkins are going to look so different. So this is kind of the fun part. Kind of like when you're carving a pumpkin, you just don't know what's going to happen. If you wanted to use a smaller brush, you could. But outline the teeth. You want a lot of space, like in between the eyes and in the mouth, because everything else is going to be black. And then you're going to fill it in. The eyes are going to glow and the mouth is going to glow. Everything else is going to be black. So you're outlining your objects, and then you're going to be filling in the pumpkin with black. Move that black paint around. You can always reshape your objects of your eyes and your mouth as you're painting here. But you can see your object will start to come to life. I will make my eyes glow a little bit more with a little bit of extra yellow. But move that black paint around, do a nice solid coat. And this is where your pumpkin will start to come to life after your outlining. Take your time here. You're probably going to have some laughing out louds, like what's happening. Very common. Some of you may not be doing a jack-o'-lantern face. Some of you may be doing like a cat or something. Anything goes here. Any design you want to put on your pumpkin. Just your picture. If you can see how my eyes and my mouth are standing out now, which is exactly what we wanted. If you happen to mess up any of these shapes, you can easily bring in orange or yellow to kind of reshape an area. But what you'll want to do is let the black dry entirely first, and then use white, mix orange with white or yellow with white to cover up the black. If you put orange on black, it's not going to cover it that well, but if you mix a little bit of white, it will help. But you got to wait for it to dry first. I'm going to put a crooked, short little stump here on the top, and I'm just going to do a couple little swirls. Maybe I'll just do like a little leaf. So you don't have to do that if you don't want. My swirls probably should have been over on the side, but it's okay. Maybe I'll do another little swirl. I'll grab a smaller brush and do another swirl, but you can see what I'm doing here. I just want you to make sure your pumpkin is painted in black entirely. And then we're going to let our pumpkin dry. We'll do another second coat of black after we do our tree. We'll also, once the black is dry on our pumpkin, we're going to go in with yellows and oranges and make our eyes and our mouth glow like there's a candle inside of our pumpkin. Okay. So I'm just going to grab a tiny brush and I'm going to do a little bit of this like swirling detail over here. Let's see. There, that helps a little bit. You don't need to do this. I'm doing it just for fun. And then we're patient and we let it dry. Now we're gonna make it glow. You can see my face is very big and it's animated. The inspiration looks a little different. It's all good. Sometimes jack-o'-lanterns, they just happen, right? Just kind of like when you're cutting, you have an idea for a design and then it might look a little different after. It's all good. Okay. So you're going to use that same medium-sized brush for the tree, and we're going to do the tree next. So if you needed another couple minutes just for your pumpkin, feel free to pause the video and take a couple minutes. But we're going to shift to the tree next. So I'm using this medium-sized brush. It's like a medium flat-headed brush. You can use a rounded tip brush here too. We're doing an eerie tree over here. And from the underside of the pumpkin, I'm going to create a little bit of like a root system. And this is where the tree, you're going to find where the trunk of the tree is, basically, from this exploration here. For me, I'm centering the tree over here. And I'm holding my brush a little bit further back. It's good just to do a single line for a tree. And just do a long extended branch. Maybe it will come over to the top of the moon. You can have 5 kind of primary branches. They don't need to be straight. They can have a little, you can make it really eerie and have like some really crooked like branches like that. You can have like a little bit of a bend. I'm using the edge of this brush. Your branches can be you want them to be as narrow as possible. But you want to start with primaries first. I'm going to do a couple of branches. Primaries are the main branches. And then we'll do secondaries from those. And you can see it looks pretty thin. I'm gonna come in and make some of these a little thicker, especially the trunk of your tree. So it's good to start thin with the trunk of your tree because then you can always make it bigger. And you can really play with making your tree as eerie shaped as you wish. The roots of the tree down here can be all painted black. You can have like a big tree root kind of coming up if you want. Anything goes. This is all black. It's going to be rounded to the bottom of the picture. You can even come down right underneath your pumpkin if you want. And you get to play with how narrow or wide you want your tree trunk to be. The bottom of the tree trunk is always a little bit bigger. I think I'm good with that width. These primary branches can be a little thicker as they come off the tree, but then they're going to get a little more thin as they extend in length. I haven't done any secondary branches. I've done a couple, but my secondary branches are going to be using a smaller brush. So we want those secondary branches to be skinnier. So I'm using the same brush just to thicken like the primaries as they root off the tree. See, they're a little thicker. I'm going to get a smaller brush to do additional branch detail work. The smaller brush, any size smaller brush works. You can do, I want you to be a little crooked with your branches. That'll make your trees look a little more spooky. And I like to alternate from the left to the right side of the tree as we're doing some spooky-like branches. I have a couple spooky branches kind of coming over into the moon. You can add as many or as little of these branches. Be light with your hand. Imagine some of these are a little broken. That would make it look a little bit more natural. But use your eye here. Do as many or as few as you wish. I want you to be happy. We're not putting leaves on this tree. It's like, you know, fall and eerie. So I want you to be happy with the number of branches that you have here. So take a couple minutes to play with this. I'm going to pause and reflect. Step back from my picture and say, am I happy? Do I want to add any more? But take a few minutes to dial this in. Sometimes when we paint trees, the branches they may become stick-like, like short in length. Try to extend some of the branches so they're a little longer and make the ends nice and skinny. So I think this side of my tree looks really good. I have some short guys over here. I'm going to make these a little longer. There we go. And you can get these branches go all the way off your picture. Your tree's going to extend off this page, right? You're thinking about a whole canopy here. So even these ones up here, they don't need to end. Have them go right off the top of your page. It might make it look a little bit more natural. This one's going to come right off the top. See how it just really makes the tree look bigger? That's good. I might do a couple of small bats. bats have like little triangle sized heads, and they have these arching wings that kind of point down. And then they have, you could do like a little triangular body, long, skinny, triangular body. And then they kind of have these rainbow like, these wings that are like webbed kind of underneath. And I'll do another bat. Long wings. That's a pretty good bat. I only paint bats once a year. Imagine that. All right, so I'm going to do another bat. This one's going to be kind of flying a little sideways. So you could always do the bat body first, and then maybe this wing will be a little higher. And they can be small. But I'm going to do 3 bats. I always do an odd number to make it look, and maybe this one will just be a little smaller. They don't have to be perfect, okay? So there's a couple bats flying in the sky. You can play with that. Mine are over the moon. They kind of look like birds, but it's all good. You can make the wings a little longer. All right. So there's a lot of details you're going to be playing with here in these steps. I want you to be happy with your branches. I want you to have a nice solid coat on your tree. We will be doing a little bit of highlighting work on your tree just so it stands out in some areas. But I want you to be happy with your branches. Okay, so I'm happy with my tree. While our tree is drying, I'm going to do a little bit of glowing, a little glow within the eyes and the mouth of the pumpkin. So if you need more time on the tree, feel free to pause the video. But I'm going to take a little bit of yellow, a little bit of red, and a little bit of white, and I'm going to create like a lighter yellowish orange just for a little bit of extra glow. It's going to have more yellow in here, but I'm using this to help do with some extra coverage. So I might fill in the eyes so they really glow. So I'm using this is a lightish orange right now. I'm covering up some of the sky. I have blue sky coming through my pumpkin. I'm just covering some of this up within the eyes because I really want the eyes to glow from within inside the pumpkin. And then I'm going to take a little bit of yellow, and on the left side of these eyes, I'm going to do a little bit of extra yellow. Just on the left side. And this yellow is getting mucky with my orange, so I'm going to let it dry so I can do another coat of yellow on top. But I'm just giving you an idea here of some design. And I'm going to do a little bit of yellow down here on my mouth. So maybe in the middle area, you can be playful of where you might want to add in a little bit of extra glow within your pumpkin. You could kind of outline the teeth if you wanted to with a little bit of yellow. You don't want to cover all the orange, but you'll see what this does pretty quickly here. You can play with how much glow and how much orange you have within these shapes. You can see how just a little bit of extra brightness on the inside of the pumpkin really allows the interior of the pumpkin to glow. So I'm going to be patient and let mine dry so I can add a little bit of extra yellow. But you can see where we're going here. And again, feel free to pause the video, have fun here. If you haven't yet paused the video and kind of checked in, and if you're painting with others, sharing it with others is a really fun thing to do. Maybe if you have a partner or a friend at home, say, hey, check this out. It's always fun to do that. Sometimes painting by yourself is still a really great time. I'm just getting a little bit of extra yellow, and I'm making the eyes glow just a little bit more on the left interior of the left edges of this pumpkin, just making it glow a little bit. And I can add little bits of yellow in the mouth if I wanted to add any more. If your mouth is still wet, you could wait a little longer. But the yellow is really fun. Maybe you want to be inspired to add a little bit of this yellow back into your moon, just to have your moon glow a little bit more. This is the evolution of your artwork. So I'm going to add a little bit of yellow to my moon, just because I can. It's all good. It's just art. You can make choices if that's something you want to do or not. One of the things about art is just being patient and just being present with what your idea is, what your inspiration is. Looking around saying, am I happy with the trees? We'll do some tree depth work in just a minute. But you may want to take more time in one area or another. Feel free to do that. That's why this video is really helpful. Because you can pause and go as you wish. You can see I added a little bit of yellow to my moon, really fun. Starting to match, right? My yellows from my moon are matching my eyes. You could even add a little bit more yellow back here to behind the scenes on the orange if you wanted to add a little bit of brightness. I personally like the contrast back there, the dark and the light kind of hitting, so I may not add too much, but you have those choices and what you may want to do. We will do a little bit of depth work to our pumpkin using a gray and to our tree using a gray. So my branches from my tree are done. You can look at the shape of your pumpkin. If your pumpkin needs any more black, feel free to add more black. But I'm going to make a gray as the next step. So if anybody would like to join me, you may. Feel free to pause the video if you're still working on your pumpkin, your glow, or your moon and your bats. So this is one of the final touches for today's class. So when you're ready to join, feel free to pause or play the video as you see fit. So I'm going to be making a gray for accent colors. So I'm making white and black together. This is going to highlight some of the tree as well as the pumpkin. And I'm using a small brush of choice. And I am going to outline the right side of the tree to give it a little bit of depth. I'm leaving a little bit of a black line. You can decide how light or gray this color is. You can see it's really highlighting the object itself. Maybe on the underside or even the top side of these branches, the big ones, you can add a little bit of outlining. A gray outlining at the top of any of these branches, top side, right? So be consistent on where you're adding this lighting source. You can go on any of these branches with a thin brush and do a little bit of a gray outline. And I'm going with a really gentle hand with a tiny brush. It really allows your branches just to kind of jump off the screen. Like the moonlight is bouncing off the top of these branches. and I'm using just the tip of this brush, and it's so tiny. I'm getting a really tiny line. So this is an optional step. If you don't like the way this looks, you don't have to do it. But I'm here to offer you different tips and tricks along the way. If you wanted to do like a hole in the tree, like where an owl may live, you can add some texture to the tree, maybe to the roots. And we'll do some similar detail work on the pumpkin as well, but we'll do the tree first. Try to keep the lines on the tree nice and tiny. You can do a little bit of paint management. You can see how thin this brush is, how the tip of the brush is nice and skitty. That's helping keep these lines thin. So if you need to change brushes, feel free to change brushes. Just go nice and slow. We'll do similar detail work. You can see how it really brings the tree to life, adding that like silver reflection per se. And if you add too much of this in one place or another, just know you can always put black on top of it to kind of like dim it down. So if you put it somewhere, if it goes on too heavy, black is your eraser on the tree, so you can always put a little bit of black paint on it once it dries. So it's a good tip. Don't let it crush your soul. Just make the update after. So you can see I added it in lots of places on my tree. It really brings that tree to life. So I'll give you all a minute to play with that. And then we'll do the same technique on our pumpkin. A little bit on our pumpkin. We want our pumpkin to stay fairly dark in color, but we'll add a little bit of outlining. All right, so I'm going to use the same thin brush for the pumpkin area. Nice thin side. And on the left-hand side of the pumpkin, I'm going to do a little bit of a gentle outline. And this is on the black area. You can outline the side of the stem. Maybe both sides of the stem if you wanted to. I'm not going to do both. I'll probably change that. And then you can kind of do the pumpkin rinds, like coming down to the left, coming down to the right. Just adding a little bit of texture on the top of the pumpkin. I'm not going to do too much. I am going to keep the right side of the pumpkin, or maybe it's going to be this side. You can play with how you, where you add in like lighter detail work. I might do a little bit on the pumpkin vines, just a little bit of outlining, just so it matches. The tree detail. If you wanted to bring any of this gray into like within the eyes, you could. I'll show you what it looks like. I'm just doing a little bit on like the right side of the eyes. It may help with your depth, it may not. Your choices. I might do it like on the underside of the mouth. Again, I'm happy to be the guinea pig and show you what this looks like on the inside of the mouth. So it may be a little bit of depth that you need. It's your choice. This is where you can be playful. So I just did a little bit of gray, kind of outlining some of these teeth. You can see where I did a little bit of depth work. I'm keeping the black of the pumpkin fairly untouched because that's important for us to really draw our eye into the design. And this is really it. This is where you can spend another 10, 15, 20 minutes, as long as you need to play with the final design. Keep an eye on the clock. But I hope that you enjoyed today's class. I would love to see your artwork after, so feel free to email me, Megan, MEAGAN, at paintandsipvt.com. You can always reach out on my Patreon, which is patreon.com/paintingwithmegan. I'd love to see your artwork and stay connected. But thanks again for joining. I hope you had a great time today. Take care.